back. Football season is right around the corner, and if you're watching this channel, you probably came in last year when I did a video about winning 3 of the last 4 years, and I talked about the tips that I used during the season, how draft prep started at the end of last year. If you haven't watched that, check it out. Today's video is going to be the most requested follow-up. How do you prepare for draft day? And I know right away that some of you have already missed this season, and I apologize for that, but I couldn't release my draft prep because some of the guys I'm in the league with, some of the guys that you all rightfully called horrible at fantasy because I've won so much, they are pretty bad. They need all the help that they can get. If you're watching, I'm sorry that I couldn't give you this before our draft, but I didn't want to give them any hints for what I was thinking about doing. This is going live exactly when our draft starts, so you will see how I prepped for it, and then I'll do a follow-up so you can see the players that I got compared to expectations. And similar to the last video, it's going to be concrete things that I am using to go into draft this year and look for number 4 out of 5 years, which I've been told by a few players already that if I win this year, the league might just end. The overarching strategy of draft prep for me is start with a list and then manipulate it and tweak it. And I have found back on Reddit Fantasy Football, there used to be something called Beer Sheets. That guy had a lot of stuff going on in his life. I think I even donated to him. He had a lot of stuff going on in his life, so he stopped, but a lot of people in the community have picked it back up. And so right now I use something very similar called Football Absurdity, which I'll link here. And they just ask you for all the stats in your league, and then they'll give you some power rankings. All I use from this is I take this and move it into Excel so that I can start to manipulate things. For a little bit of context for you, our draft is a 12-person draft. It's a snake draft. We don't do anything crazy. We do 0.5 PPR. Otherwise, the rosters are standard. So 1 QB, couple at each of the positions, and then 1 flex for wide receiver, running back, or tight end. We also did something different this year. Normally, as commissioner, I would release the draft pick the same day of the draft. But this year, based on feedback, we released the draft pick a week early. So I've known for a while now that I have the 8th pick in this year's draft. We'll talk about why I think that's a good pick in a second, but so you don't think this is a waste of time if you have the 1 or the 12 or whatever, I'm just gonna go over how I prep like my best available list, because you can use that and then apply it to whatever pick you have. So I would do the same thing if I had the 1 or the 6 or whatever. Okay, back to the prep. I start by putting this table into Excel. And then the first thing that I want to know is, how does Vegas value these players? In the last video, I talked a lot about leveraging Vegas, and some of you had questions about where to look and whether you needed an account, and some of you couldn't even register for an account and whatever. I want to say, here's exactly what I do. Once this is in Excel, I go into DraftKings. You can just Google DraftKings Players Futures. And without having to log in, you can navigate to their lines. And the first annoying thing that you'll notice is you can't copy all of these lines and just dump them into Excel. So they do a good job like protecting this, I guess, against scrapers or whatever. But there are some hacks you can use to make your life a little bit easier. I would take screen grabs of sections, and then I would like dump all of those into ChatGPT and say, can you put this into a table for me? Then I would bring that into Excel and I do a VLOOKUP. And my goal here is I am not going to bet on Vegas lines. That is not the strategy here, to just go with whatever Vegas is predicting the best. There's a lot of factors that go into Vegas. Also with these numbers, you have to remember that some of them are minus 110, some of them are plus 100. So there's different like odds and paybacks for whether players hit these lines. But overall, what I'm using this for is directional. And the first thing that jumps out, like when you look at what Football Absurdity did versus what Vegas thinks, there are mismatches. There are guys like Derrick Henry. Vegas thinks Derrick Henry is going to have a big season on Baltimore, like huge, probably 2nd or 3rd most yards, and then a ton of TDs. And overall, I had them nailed down at like the 2nd or 3rd overall running back. And this is really important because the Football Absurdity has him at like the 6th or the 7th. So if you are hovering at the 8 or the 9 or the 10 and he starts to, and he's available versus some other people like Bijan or whomever, that might be enough for me to tip the way of Derrick Henry. So before you all say that that's crazy that I would take Henry over Bijan, I'm not doing that in any sort of scenario. I'm just illustrating where you can make the argument for using Vegas lines over like experts and statistics from last year or whatnot. It's not perfect. And I found myself wanting to make this as perfect as possible, because what I did with all this data is I backed into what the total season fantasy points were and ranked that according to Vegas. And of course, you want this to be as perfect as possible. But just like the football absurdity stuff, you have to remember that, or I have to remember that what we're doing is we're analyzing predictions. Vegas is good at making predictions, but it's still a prediction. It's a hypothesis. It's what they think might happen. But like Josh Jacobs a few years ago, like Pacheco last year, some of these guys can blow these numbers out of the water. So no matter what type of analysis we do on this, it's out of our control. The last thing that I want is to add in the notes that I was keeping for myself at the end of last year, players that I was terrified to play against. And this was a great reminder for me. I see Amon-Ra St. Brown toward the top of the first round or mid-first round, and already I'm like less excited about him. I don't see how he's going to be that great of a player, blah, blah, blah. Or Sam Laporta, I'm like, oh, maybe the hype's too high. And then I open up my notes, and both those guys, who happen to be on the line, both those guys, I'm like, in my notes, it was like, get these guys. They are terrifying to play against. No matter what experts say, if they fall, they would be a pleasure to have on the team. So I like asterisk those guys. Then what I do is I set up a mock draft for myself just based on who I would be taking at each pick. And that way I know that like in a perfect draft, one that I think would be the best executed, most efficient draft from all the people that I'm playing against. And for example, this would mean nobody takes Bijan before the 8. Taking Bijan before the 8 pushes somebody down to me. And I want to make this as hard as possible because I personally would not take Bijan until like the 12 or the 2-1 or the 2-2, etc. So I want to make this like everybody that I really want, my top 8 guys. I put this into a list and I did about the first 6 rounds of the draft this year. I know you're probably watching this video hoping that I show just like my 6-round mock draft so you can use that list as your list, but I'm not going to do that because drafts are dependent on everyone who's picking and it's emotional. So if some guy takes a quarterback in the 3rd round, like I think might be useful or good to take Josh Allen, then could open the floodgates. And so if I put up what I think might happen, it's going to be so different and really embarrassing for me to share that with you. So instead, I want to go over who I think is going to be available and who I'm excited to take at these picks. You could see how I'm preparing for the 8. And then at the end, I'm going to put up a list of players and I will show you where I think is a good place to take these people in the draft, regardless. Let's go over the first round. These are the people. This is my order for what I would do with the first 8 picks. I would start with CMC, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb. I think then I would even go Amon-Ra, Breece Hall, Justin Jefferson a little bit later because I think it's like just a little bit of a questionable situation in Minnesota, but that doesn't mean that I think he won't perform at all. And that means if I get any of those guys at the 8, I'm really happy. But I am also very happy taking Jonathan Taylor at the 8. So I think I will end up with one of those 8 guys. I think I'll probably end up with Jonathan Taylor. I am hoping that before my next pick, a lot of the sought after running backs and wide receivers continue to be taken off the board. Guys like Bijan, Garrett Wilson, Henry, Etienne, AJ Brown, those types of guys, because I want to break it wide open with Sam Laporta at the 2-5. If I can't get Laporta, I'm going to end up going with best available. I don't care if I go running back. I think this is a really deep wide receiver draft, and I have some people bookmarked. I'm really hoping for Laporta, and that would leave me with Taylor, Laporta, and then a lot of receivers to go after, and maybe QB in the next few rounds. If you're following the draft prep, the 3rd round still has a ton of deep receivers, and so I am battling with which receivers I want to stack. I'll probably go receiver in 3-4 if I go running back, tight end in the first 2. And I'm thinking I'm going to really break it open with Zay Flowers at the 3-8. This would be someone who is not projected to go that high. I loved what he did in Baltimore throughout the whole season. He's a young guy. He's really good. And I want to lock him down because I would be more pissed if I don't get him than someone like DJ Moore. So I am looking at DJ Moore in the 4th round. I think he'll probably be gone by then. If he's gone and if Zay was gone, I would be more disappointed if Zay Flowers was gone. I love DJ Moore. I just, for whatever reason, think that Zay Flowers is set up for a big season. There should be plenty left in the 4th round because if I'm getting Taylor at the 8th, this isn't as deep of a draft. You're looking at guys like Mixon, Kamara, a lot of these RB1s, and potentially people getting their RB2s in the 3rd and 4th round. So I am hoping that there's going to be a receiver available, somebody like Waddle, DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs. But if all of these people are gone and there's really good running backs left, I have no shame going running back and just waiting. I am purposefully pushing QB out to round 5 or round 6 this year. Last year I was really early with Justin Fields at the end of the 3rd or in the 4th round. But I think that there are so many good ones. And once the waterfall starts with QBs in our draft this year with Josh Allen, I feel like I have a little bit of time to still get someone like Lamar or Anthony Richardson or Stroud. So a lot of elite quarterbacks that shouldn't go boom, 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 but give me a little bit of an opportunity to get in there. Okay, enough keeping you guys waiting. I'm going to put up who I want in the first 6 rounds, and I'll report back on who I get. And I also want to show you who all I think is going to go in the first 6 rounds. And then maybe in this table, I'll also include roughly what round I think they would be, or if you were stretching, where I would take them. So I'll have 2 columns. One is going to be the stretch column, and one will be the conservative column for them. And all good picks. You know, I just don't want to like rank everybody. My whole goal with giving you guys all this information is to prove that I know enough to go toe-to-toe with the legend Stu Feiner on Barstool Sports Advisor. So if any of you out there are watching, have an into that, please hook me up with an intro. I would love to be a prop betting addition to them. I know nothing about money lines and spreads. I am good at picking first TDs, crazy parlays, like that sort of stuff. And I think it would be a great addition to their content that they already have. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.